So last year, I was in a store here in the Mount Pleasant area, and I was shopping, and I ran into a girl that I went to college with. And that's a big deal for me because I went to school in Virginia. And so all of my friends stayed in the Richmond, Northern Virginia area, and with the exception of my college roommate, I had not seen anyone from college in about 13 years. So we're standing there in the store, we're catching up, and she asked me, why did I move to Charleston? And I told her I moved here for my job, and so she asked me where I worked. And I said, I work for my church. And the look on her face when I told her that I worked for my church, I wish I had a camera and I had taken a picture of it, but I didn't. So I scoured the internet and found the closest thing to what she looked like, and it was this. Complete and utter shock was the look on her face. And so when I think about that look is a testament of why I worship. I worship because I've been forgiven much. And when I think about how much I've been forgiven, I think about a story that we find at the end of Luke chapter 7. Jesus is having dinner. He's at a Pharisee's house named Simon. And as they're having dinner, this woman comes in, and she's crying. And at some point in the meal, she finds herself on the floor at his feet. Her tears are falling on his feet. She's wiping his feet with her hair and her tears. She anoints his feet with oil. And the entire time this is going on, Simon the Pharisee is thinking in his head, if he were really a prophet, he would know that this is a sinful woman, and he wouldn't let her touch him. And Jesus hears his thoughts and responds to him out loud with a parable. And the parable is there are two men. They both borrowed money. One borrowed 500 denarii and one borrowed 50 denarii. And so that makes sense in our world, we need to step back and understand that one denarius is worth about 1 day's wage. So think about where you work, how much you make an hour, what your salary is, and imagine that you've borrowed 500 days worth of wages, a little over a year's salary. That's what one man borrowed. And the other man borrowed 50 days worth of wages, close to 2 months' salary. And so Jesus says the money lender forgave both of these men of their debt. And he asked him, which one do you think loves the money lender more? And the Pharisee says, the one who had the most debt. And Jesus says, that's right. And he pulls back and he says, this woman, she's been forgiven much, so she loves much. But those who have been forgiven little, they love little. And so I think about that story, and I imagine, what if we were there at the dinner? Who do you think you are? Are you the Pharisee, or are you the woman? Now, my natural inclination is to want to say that I'm the woman, but I wonder if most of the time I'm not the Pharisee. And I wonder that because we live in a society where we judge our sin in degrees on a continuum. And it's natural because that's how our society works. If you run a red light, you don't get the same punishment as someone who steals $10,000. If someone steals $10,000, they're not punished the same way as someone who takes a life. And so that's how our world works. And so we're conditioned to compare our sin to someone else and think that ours is less than theirs. And then I wonder, looking at that parable, if Jesus wasn't trying to point out that sins are different, but the weight of our sin. Because I think about the guy who borrowed 50 days worth of wages. That's a lot of money, but it's not so much that he didn't think in the back of his head that at some point in his own power, he could have paid it back. But the man who borrowed 500 days worth of wages, that must have seemed hopeless to him. There was no way he was going to pay that money back. And so his gratitude was because he understood the weight of his debt. And I wonder if we really understand the weight of our sin, no matter what it is. And so when I think about the parable, when I think about that woman at Jesus' feet, when I think about my friend looking at me in the store, we laugh at it, and I found that funny picture. But at the moment, it stung a little bit because it reminded me of where I was. But that sting turned to gratitude because it reminds me of who my God is and what he did for me. And so I always want to be that woman at his feet, pouring out all that I have and all that I am in worship of him. And so I worship because I've been forgiven much.